So I was watching this video about high-speed trains.
Because of the streamlined, Spitzer-shaped nose cone of the locomotive,
So
the train became
what I
known
was
as the
gonna
bullet
say
train.
here is
Since the first bullet train, things like the
they talk about how
indoor
they're
hours
going at 250 miles an hour um in various countries.
travel time will be reduced to only 90 minutes.
Okay, so these trains are pretty cool, right? Now, subway trains are kind of like this, just not as fancy. They're kind of big and square. Um, so then I say, now let's look at the other side of inner city transport, other than subways. So subways are made to be full on like train tracks, right? It's just trains. Now, cities in the past, in the early 1900s, most all of them had trams. Boise here in my area here had trams put in by the French. And if you watch in this video, they talk a lot about French railways and the technology being sold to Germany, Japan, etc. for certain patents for their trains. Now, I'd like to get some patent credibility. You know, I always said this. The internet should work like if you prove that you were instrumental in idea development with your blog, your videos on whatever source online, that can be easily tracked. And if you're creating and generating science that's being employed by various governments, like I am, then it should be, instead of me being blackballed and having all my videos get all the numbers reduced back down to a few thousand, I should just be directly acknowledged and work with finally. So in this case here, I'm going to ask people to clarify this insanity. So like I've said, they're here in downtown Boise. They did this in New York as well, but I don't live over there, so I'll describe what happened here in Boise. So in the late 90s, um, there was an entire electric rail system that had been dismantled maybe in the 60s or 70s that went around with a high-speed tram train system around, and it could also run, full-size trains, but they had these modified tram trains. And it was an electrical grid that went around to Nampa. I described this before and looped around. So it all comes from downtown Boise, where there's all kinds of neat stuff going on. Like they had the world's earliest, there's been videos about this I've done and other people have done, earliest oxygen concentration system, largest and most advanced for the 1800s, right here in Boise. So, that produces enough oxygen and pumps it to the hospitals to create O2 and clean everything. And it also comes up out of various playing parks like BSU Stadium when they're fake turf. Well, that's pumping up oxygen so they can perform better. So that, hydrogenated oxygen in different things. And they don't discuss this openly and brag about it because it was already there before the current system was here. So they're just still using it and upkeeping it. It's very fascinating. And I'd like a whole series of documentaries about it, full on, with, at full access and interviews and about how it all works and is upkept. Now, there was this enormous system of electric rails. Of course, it went past the Idaho State Capitol, and there was originally a plan to have it go underground beneath the Capitol because they put in that underground section. And with that, the original plan was to have direct access and for it to be like a public People's Republic zone instead of fascism or whatever that every state, and I'm not blaming Idaho specifically, just the whole 3 section system for every state and every federal government is ludicrous. It's just a bunch of people doing stupid shit. So the real system was, you see this design, it's like a um light bulb of energy. There's a reason for that. And then the spoke here. So it was supposed to be like, you could show up and get off and there'd be continuous trams. Now, the entertainment center, like the Egyptian theater, was originally planned here, if it'll load, to be an enormous theater that would be the entire block and be, 10 stories high and have absolutely enormous projections, stacked and interleaved, so that you'd have, 16K on a, screen 4 times bigger than IMAX was the original concept. And that turned into a tiny little playhouse with a projector called the Egyptian Theater. So all of this splendor that's going to happen probably still in the future, it's just all looping. It's just fascinating, like how all of this was updated even in the late 90s, all of the trams, and they put in all of these entrances for underground parking all over underneath each building square structure. And then sometimes the parking would come out, and part of it in the middle of the shops like this, and there'd be shops on either side stacked however many stories, with potential to put more on top as necessary. Now, the trams were updated so that because they were, they would go along, like in San Francisco or anywhere, along surface streets, and it'd be a big pain, right? Because you'd have to wait and the lights would turn and the tram would go through, and it was kind of helping and hindering depending upon who you were and the timing of the moment. So, it was fun, but then, it was like the old 1800s definition of liberal, freedom ran Boise. And then the state government said they ran Boise, and that Boise was being rebellious. And then they did things like take out the newly updated tram systems for now 20 to 30 years and try to remove parking, underground parking garages, cement them over, cover them up. I've seen the craziest things, and then they have to be dug out later, and then they're covered up again as, everybody says, naughty, naughty, Boise, you're not allowed to be beautiful and useful. It's just bizarre, just sickening. So, this tram system was updated, the same as it will be in New York. So the deeper subways are just for higher speed, right? And they'll be updated to be much higher speed and more tubular, and allow you, say in New York, to go out along into straight out into upstate New York at high speed, straight into the city, so people can come and go quicker. And then the trams, like they did here in Boise, become right below the streets. Now, when they were putting it in, they were doing this interesting mixture thing where they had like these metal grates and like sidewalks. So then the metal grate area was like a sewer, not the sewer, but not for poop. The sewage system of the Treasure Valley, it just runs into the river. That's why you get in big trouble for littering, and stuff, because it goes right into the river and ruins everything. So this is a whole system built around original principles of freedom and freedom of movement. And that's been held up. So I've come in and talked infinitely about different plans and how they're supposed to go forward. And so these trams were very beautiful. It was along with it came a return of different trees they put in and had planters with deep areas for the roots to go so they could be there for 50 to 100 years, no problem. Well, those were all removed because it was like, okay, the center of the streets, there was the trams, and the water would pour on either side of them if it was raining, for example. And then there'd be like open to the sky, like a width of like, what was it? I think it was like, I don't know, 5 or 8 feet or something. And so you'd have these windows on top of the trams. And so you'd be exposed to the sky above and the street and the traffic on either side. And then people, pedestrians and stuff, would walk down the middle usually. And then in certain areas would be broadened out into water passages alongside for certain watercraft that, have minimal splash and different stuff for, you know, jet, what are they called? Jet skis? No, jet, whatever those are called. I guess they're called jet skis. It doesn't sound right every time I hear it. Anyways, so I've talked about plans for different cities like Boise and other places over in the Mediterranean where they would have water on the streets, and you would have this system where, say it's an inch deep and you're rolling along, and then when you go to brake, there'd be these fins on the front of your car that would flip, and then the water would push against the fins suddenly upright like a shields and halt your forward progress rapidly. And that would be employed in a green city where everything would be automated ultimately. This was all discussed by different groups all the way back to Napoleon. I'm just modernizing it because now you can have proper polymer, covers over the underground bridges, or I mean the underground trams. They're just barely underground. And then when passengers offload at different spots, it's like much quicker, and you can do all kinds of neat stuff like have the steps come right out on street corners or like right into the corners of buildings where there's a little like reception building area with like stairs and elevators, or you can walk out onto the street. All of these neat things that have been removed again. So now the Capitol building was supposed to be practical. It was supposed to be updated with technology, and it was supposed to be a seat of power, of electrical power. So the tram energy, negative, positive, pulled from the earth and the sky would meet, and you have these two wings of government, but that's power governing, electricity governing. And then you have different experimental concepts of the central dome being for broadcasting actual energy to different towers to provide electricity down into grids in different small areas. This is all possible from the 1800s forward. So somewhere along the line, fascist, people, monopoly players came in and took over and put limitations on freedom and said that they ran whatever building looks big and powerful, that they gotta run that, man. They've gotta be powerful. So these trams, when you have it all set up for the 2020s to 2030s, if you put it back in different cities, it here's the other great part. You can do different neat things, like you can have the subways, which are already in a lot of cities, slightly deeper, and they can mesh so that you can get right off of your tram and walk down right into your lower subway. Obviously, here in Boise, I never heard of any um, subway tunnels through here. Here's what the only thing I ever heard was that there was a subway tunnel closer to the river or something that ran and then connected to a regular train station or something and then came through. I don't know. It's probably true. I don't know. So, um, the concept here is that cities are supposed to be, like I said, fun centers, conglomerate centers for different activities and events. So, by mixing it all in, like they've done somewhat with the parking garages and the stuff, and it's fully modernized, then your car can be in whatever parking garage, and then you can check based on the whole grid of the whole system out of the governing system of the government of running the whole automated system. Your car, say your car's parked here, but you take a tram somewhere else into the city because you want to do something and it'll get you there with some friends. So then you have your car auto drive, or hell, even turn into a taxi temporarily for a couple hours while you're in the movies for certain people to use. Like, there's so much possibility. And in the future, you get to the point where, currently in Boise, all over from Boise spreading into the surrounding cities, you have those scooters everywhere. Electric scooters that go quicker and quicker and farther as the tech gets better. So at a certain point, there'll just be a steady amount of cars and with different themes that are just generally part of a downtown city. And it's just like you just have your style of car. And if you're a rich person, you have your custom decals on it that are ready when you get to the city. Like, all of this ownership of everything isn't really important to some people, but it needs to be. And then other people, it's too important. Like, that's why I describe my battery bank coinage farms to generate quicker crop growth and create actual valuable coinage currency that you can get out of the bank, out of the ground, out of the riverbank, and you can say, okay, this is charged, this neodymium coin inside of a chrysalis of, silver rhymed um phosphite mixed with quartz. There could be so many different coins for different purposes, for running different types of computers and for different types of capacitors and all different stuff. Coinage needs to be part of the modern tech system, and new types of coins get created and minted because there's a primitive way of creating crystals where they would use menthol from mint, the methane, and they could use that to stimulate crystal growth of certain minerals so that they could have this coinage all the way back to the 1800s. It was just all much greater effort back then. Everything had to be done with a bunch of labor. So what the French imagined for, because the French in this case, I'm just saying, they're just West Egypt that moved out of the desert to the north and settled into the Europe area. So that type of mentality for beauty and nature mixing needs, I mean, I'd love it if that all was the original concepts that I'm describing. Like, how do I say it? Like, at one point in Boise, I went with my brother, and it was where this hotel is or something right here. There was like a 4-story building with a bunch of basketball courts from the 1800s, and they tore it out and put in different stiff stuff, and then tore that stuff out and put in these hotels. And it's like a Ponzi scheme of bullshit. These buildings are built pretty crappy, and then they can, put in new buildings, and different people can say they're rich, and nothing's really going on. Nothing's progressing into the future quick enough. So that's why I always push so hard when it comes to Boise, because it was envisioned as not a utopia, just a place where, it's safer than even Vegas ever could be for fun as a downtown. Um, I guess that pretty much describes, what else do I remember? I just remember the beautiful, like, fascinating grills where the water would go through, and how like they had green paint and it would quickly like get eroded by the water flow from all the storms and flash flooding, into these sewer lines that would run out to the river. And then there would build up this, like, sort of really orangey red, unique color. I don't know what type of metal mix of permanent um rust that never went past a certain point. Like the paint and everything prepared it, and then it would just stay that way. Um let's see here. There used to be, I'm trying to think of the positives here. There used to be helicopter pads in more places. Um, Now, what hasn't existed that I'm proposing, if we go out here on the freeway, is that the Boise Town Square Mall be turned into a big dome here. I've done videos about this before on Facebook a number of times with diagrams so that there'd be a whole automated system that would feed into the freeway system, and also have an off branch freeway system that would, come over here along here and get to the Boise Depot. And as you would build this is something I didn't really say before, you would include the tram system that's underground right into the train system. So you transfer at the Boise Depot. This was the whole plan, from the tram system to a train system to go out this way and this way. Um, and then there was also, water systems where there's micro locks against the hills so you could be raised up for your watercraft and go on different canals to places all set up. And most of them, here's one, but most of them have been buried. They're now just pipes underneath neighborhoods. Extra houses were put in where they used to run. It's just ridiculous. To take away any form of transport, no matter how leisurely and luxurious. It's like jealousy took over, and what was once the most potentially beautiful place just became a nightmare for a while. Um, and now we're getting things back under control, it seems like. When I say we, I just mean, I don't know. The military, it seems like they've been running more anti-terrorist operations and not really talking about it too much on the news. Um I guess that's about it. Just I'll have to dig up my pictures on the multi-level system for my whole feeding of traffic around into different parking garages over in different spots surrounding it. It's pretty cool, and I don't really want to talk about it all again, so I'll just show off that video. I'll try to. I can't seem to find certain videos. And Facebook, wow, you can't go back through and search for anything. Eventually, like I always say, Facebook will just update and provide you the opportunity to search by the title of your video or whatever. And then I can just put in the keywords and search back through and pull up my Town Square Mall videos and show it all off. But a lot of people have seen it, you know, it's already known about. And I just like to get some feedback on that and this other stuff I'm talking about, you know, eventually directly so that I can actually be part of the process of the engineering of the world a little bit.